Good morning, everyone. I think the past 2 years have really upended common held belief in this country that colleges and universities are slow moving, inward looking ivory towers that might be disconnected from communities. I think that's been completely upended in the last couple of years as we've seen institutions of higher education move with incredible speed and flexibility in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, literally moving millions of students from in-person to online instruction overnight, and also rethinking the higher ed model and looking at issues of equity, access, and student success in light of George Floyd. But I think the last two twin crises in Afghanistan and Ukraine in the last 9 months have really had universities rethinking how do they respond to geopolitical crises and what is the role that universities can play in supporting scientists and scholars in exile, as well as being helpful in the resettlement of refugees here at home. Today, we're lucky to have a great group of speakers who represent both public and private institutions with varying experience in helping evacuate and host Afghan and Ukrainian students and scholars. Hopefully, we'll learn from them how important structures and support networks have been for managing these unexpected crises and how they can be leveraged for future refugee crises that we anticipate. With that, let me begin with our very first speaker, Kurt Richter from Michigan State University. Kurt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bernie. It's nice to see so many friends and colleagues I've gotten to know since August of 2012 as we worked through these complicated issues around scholars, everything. I want to thank Rutgers for having me speak today. Today, I'm going to tell a story, and it's a story of what MSU was able to do. But at the heart of this story are a whole bunch of good people who were at the right place that made the right decision at the right time to allow Michigan State University to evacuate 77 people from Afghanistan at the end of August. We were able to evacuate our staff for our USAID funded projects, our scholars who were going to Kabul University pursuing master's degrees in agronomy, and their families. We did not get everybody we wanted, but we got everybody we could. And so MSU never wanted to get into the refugee business. We had no plans to do this, and this is something that happened because of circumstance. We were engaged in Afghanistan because of a USAID funded project. And we got engaged in this conversation around Afghan staff and scholars being able to access US visas via the P1, P2 program. And lo and behold, that was early August. By August 15th, our potential people for the P1, P2 program became on the list for evacuation. And we began to work around the clock with people on Capitol Hill and the State Department, DOD, and inside Hamid Karzai International Airport to get our people onto vans, past the Taliban, through multiple checkpoints, and eventually through the gates of Hamid Karzai International Airport. And honestly, we didn't have a plan past that. We didn't know what we were going to do with them. We didn't know where they were going to go. Fortunately, we made arrangements through Representative Alyssa Slotkin's office to Ambassador Kim in Albania, who contacted the Prime Minister of Albania and arranged for MSU's staff and others to become refugees in Albania. But what I want to talk about now is about what happened once they got there. And that is, we had a group of students that ended a master's program in Kabul that was funded by USAID 2 months prior to finishing their degrees. And it became our desire to make sure these individuals had a good place, an opportunity to continue their education. So we reached out to USAID and asked them to use our funding that was designed to be spent in Afghanistan on Afghanistan citizens to continue their education in Albania as refugees at the Albanian University of Tirana. We had a lot of conversations, a lot. Worked on budgets, and eventually we secured permission for them to start a 1-year professional master's program at the Agricultural University of Tirana. This is a big victory for us because we didn't want our scholars sitting in Albania and not being able to do something, not preparing them for what's next. And we found an avenue to do that through a third party. Fast forward 7 months, we got word from the State Department that they had moved mountains and did amazing work and worked with the Department of Homeland Security and Customs Patrol to process our people to the United States. Our scholars are still weeks or months away from finishing their degrees. So we went back to USAID and asked them permission to allow our scholars to continue their educational program online once they got to the United States. After weeks of conversation, I'm happy to report that our scholars will begin on May 4th the online version of their master's program in Albania in the United States as refugees. The reason I'm telling this long story is because I want to present this as a model, but show the importance of understanding how U.S. funding mechanisms work and how we can work together as a body of higher education institutions to help the United States government create new pathways to support people who may be out of a situation in a country as a refugee, but not yet into a final destination, be it the United States, be it Canada, be it Rwanda. How do we help people where they're at while they're in this process? Once again, this is a story about good people. I have nothing but respect for the people that I've worked with through this process inside the State Department, inside of Homeland Security, inside the embassies that I've been engaged with. I have faith that we can change this system, but we need to really work on thinking about new ways to engage with people where they're at, not where we want them to be, and not wait till they're on our campuses to find ways to support them. And I will take our community working together with the US government to create new norms of operation that don't just dictate people have to get a scholarship from the US government and return to their home country, because that's not going to work for everybody going forward. And I think that's something we've learned from this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bernie, and looking forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. I'm always get chills when I hear you tell that story about the 77 Afghans you've got out. Remember that period well, and getting them past the Taliban into the airport was a particularly harrowing moment. But next, let me introduce our next speakers, Jennifer Murray from Bard College and Tina Joaquin, also from Bard College, Berlin. Bard really has been a leader in helping displaced students and scholars over many years. And so we're very happy to hear how Bard has dealt with these two crises most recently. So with that, let me hand it over to Jennifer and Tina.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernie. And I think this is, thank you, Kurt, for setting up such an excellent segue to our various institutional responses. Many of you may know that in January of 2020, Bard was one of the co-founders of the Open Society University Network, which was launched in early 2020, which was a very interesting time for our sector. And I want to introduce that just by reading a quote from our Executive Vice President and Vice Chancellor of the Open Society University Network, Jonathan Becker. One of the fundamental design principles of OSIN is that transnational networks built on horizontal linkages and shared values can provide substantive support and resilience to educational institutions in times of disruption and crisis. Moreover, in times of crisis, it is important to develop a mosaic of responses and include, in the great liberal education tradition, a relentless focus on student well-being and safe access to educational opportunities. So that was one of our founding principles. One of the first ways that my work became involved with OSIN was in response to the pandemic, when everything moved online. We hadn't intended to include online education and virtual courses as part of the Open Society University Network, but in the summer of 2020, we developed a suite of those, and those have been going on every term since then. In reality, what this meant was that our faculty and students from Annandale, as well as other networked institutions around the globe, were sitting in the classroom with American University of Afghanistan students, seeing them having power cuts, hearing from them about the crisis as it was unfolding. So our students were in a Zoom room like this, kind of living that experience in some way with their peers. So we've continued those courses also as a way to provide some sustained connection to students who have not been able to be evacuated or who are still in third countries and still, have not yet made it to a final destination, whether that is in the United States or elsewhere, a final higher education destination. And as just a poignant example of the power of these classes, the first student who made it to our campus, we learned about him because the faculty member who taught him that summer said, "This student just called me and said that they've gotten to the United States and they're in New York City. Is this true?" And, a few phone calls and Zoom calls later, we realized it was, and we were able to bring that student to campus, and that initiated our response and intake of students. Another aspect of the Open Society University Network is the Threatened Scholars Initiative, which is funded through OSIN and is very similar in its work to the Scholars at Risk profile. So we were also responding to faculty need. Part of our response was we were able to be so nimble in part because in 2016, we were a founding member of the Consortium on Forced Migration and Displacement in Education, together with Sarah Lawrence, Vassar, Bennington, and Bard College Berlin. Some of the work of the consortium was to develop a curriculum or a minor for undergraduates interested both in responding to and somehow connecting to migrant-facing organizations in their work within and outside of the classroom, as well as to develop a body of research and academic work around the root causes of forced migration. The core course in that certificate program is the Lexicon of Migration, taught at each of those campuses. Additionally, out of this, we've all talked a lot about relationships. We met Adam Brown, who's vice provost at the New School for Social Research. His Global Mental Health Lab team are now providing training to administrators and staff on campus here who are working directly with our students, so that we're kind of building our toolbox with some new understanding of what our students are bringing with them and ways to respond to that are maybe not quite at the psychoanalytical level, but can help students get through the time and manage their anxiety and trauma while they're being students. Sarah Wilcox has mentioned, this is in our DNA of higher education institutions. In 1956, Bard responded to the Soviet invasion of Hungary by bringing in 300 Hungarian students to do an English language intensive, and some stayed here to study, others went elsewhere. And again, to quote Sarah, we are a scrappy bunch, and we certainly are here at Bard. So when our president, Leon Botstein, announced that Bard would offer 100 scholarships to Afghan students fleeing Afghanistan, we all knew on campus that we were going to have to get very creative very quickly. And one of the first things that we did to bring ourselves together and think about how we could do this was to replicate, in a sense, the response team that was stood up to respond to COVID. We brought together a group of professionals from across the campus working in all of the different areas we knew would need to have a voice in and contribute to decision-making and responding to the needs of these students. That group continues to meet weekly, and we've learned a lot as everyone here. And I want to thank many of you on the call, Afghan Futures Fund, IIE, the President's Alliance for Leadership, and for the work in raising funds for various institutions who are able to offer places to students. On campus, in addition to that team that is responding to the students, as well as thinking about advocacy, we developed a common course, and we have, through the Threatened Scholars Initiative, Afghan faculty fellows. So these are displaced Afghan faculty members, academics. They're not here on our campus, they're elsewhere in the United States, but they meet with the course faculty. This is a common course that meets two different general education requirements for these students, and it's another way we felt for the academic side of the college to have a kind of eye on or hands on this cohort. And what these scholars have been able to do is to help us interpret and translate in both directions the needs of the students and the feedback they're hearing. Just that linguistic ability and closeness to the experience brings us more understanding of what's happening. We know that students aren't always going to share as completely with in another language and with those of us who may be seen as sort of the decision makers for certain aspects of their time on campus. And I would say, our thoughts for moving forward, BARD is very active with the President's Alliance and in the Pathways initiatives to think about how higher education can respond, not just here in the United States, but again, to sort of reference Kurt, to activate one's networks. We all have international networks of various types. And what can we be collaborating with our colleagues abroad in preparing students and creating those pathways either to come here or elsewhere. And one way we've done that, not only through the online courses, but other efforts through other aspects of BARD, is to create micro-credentialing programs. Students are being taught in refugee camps. And just recently, we've worked out the details for BARD to be able to credential and provide transcripts to those students. So this is beginning to provide some formal documentation to students who will need that to bridge into a formal education program, either where they are or in another location. And I will just say that we're looking forward to the development of the P4 program, hopefully, so that the role of higher education institutions can be more integrated with the governmental response and the recognition of the expertise that we all bring. And that these strong international networks will help shield ourselves, institutions, faculty, and students as we all feel the rising pressure of authoritarian attacks on populations and certainly on ideas of academic freedom. And with that, I will turn the floor over to my colleague, Tina Marie Joaquin from Bard College, Berlin.
Hi, thank you, Jen. And thank you so much, Rutgers, for putting this on and for having us. It's really amazing to see so many other people who are just engaged and really passionate about these issues. For my time, I thought that I'd tell you about some of the programs that Bard Berlin has been able to expand and adapt to support students and scholars in from areas of crisis. The largest one that we have is called the Program for International Education and Social Change. This is the PIAC Scholarship. It's specifically for students from areas of crisis. Since it was established in 2015, we have enrolled 46 students. There are 11 students who will be coming on this scholarship for the next academic year. Of those, 7 are from Afghanistan, 2 are Syrian, and 2 are Ukrainian. And what's really interesting and I think unique about the program is that it's a really great example of both private and institutional philanthropy working together to be able to support these people. So of the scholarship, 70% is covered by Bard Berlin, and the other 30% is covered by private donors. So that's how that works. We also have the Open Learning Initiative, or the OLIVE program. This is a college preparatory program that's now part of the OSIM consortium with CEU as well as the University of East London. It was established in 2019 at BCB, and currently there are 6 Syrian students at BCB who are being prepared for a BA transfer or application. 2 of those will be continuing on at BCB via the PIAC program. But all in all, 70% of the students who have been enrolled in this preparatory program at either BCB or CEU have gone on to be admitted to BA or MA programs. So it's been quite successful. Specifically for Afghan students, with Bard Annandale, Bard Berlin has been really engaged in trying to get them into Germany and into university. So we've admitted 16 students from Afghanistan. Most of them are from the American University of Afghanistan, but some are also from Kabul U and other universities. Of those, 9 have arrived and 7 are expected to arrive in the fall. And there are a few for whom admission is pending. We also have the Threatened Scholars Initiative that Jen mentioned to support scholars. Right now at BCB, we have 4 scholars who are being supported, 2 via the TSI initiative, and 2 via the Philipp Schwarz Initiative, which is a German government fellowship. So these faculty, they teach at BCB, they continue their research, they're really active in the community. There are several more scholars that will be joining us in the fall, and BCB will also be supporting Ukrainian scholars via 6-month emergency TSI scholarships. So that's coming, and we're very excited about it. And I think that is my time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Jennifer. Really impressive what Bard College has been doing to support refugees and students and scholars. Our next speaker will be Nicole Tuzinski, Associate Director of the New University in Exile Consortium, an organization with really deep roots in supporting scholars in exile. So with that, Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bernie. And thank you too to Anu and Rick for organizing this phenomenal program today. I'm delighted to be participating. My name is Nicole Tuzinski. I'm the Associate Director of the New University in Exile Consortium based at the New School in New York. As Alan Goodman mentioned this morning, the New School is the home of the original University in Exile created in 1933 by the New School's first president, Alvin Johnson, to provide a safe intellectual home for threatened scholars fleeing the growing threat of Nazism in Europe. 85 years later, the consortium's founder and director, Professor Arian Mack, launched the consortium to address a problem she had identified, having herself brought a number of endangered, threatened scholars to the New School, which is that many of these scholars faced a second exile. Though they were physically safe, they were left more or less on their own in their new academic homes. Realizing that this was a common problem for hosted endangered scholars, Arian launched the consortium in the fall of 2018 with the mission of creating a welcoming, supportive, and vibrant intellectual community for exiled scholars. At the outset, 11 universities and colleges in the US joined, and today the consortium has grown to over 51 members globally in the US, Canada, France, Germany, Jordan, the Netherlands, soon to be Poland, South Africa, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. And when a member joins the consortium, they commit to hosting at least one exiled scholar. And together we now support over 70 scholars from 20 different countries. So now to tell you a little bit more about the work we do. Our Cornerstone Program is a weekly consortium scholar seminar. Each week we meet online, which we did even pre-pandemic, for a seminar led by a distinguished academic. During the seminar, we either discuss a topic or theme like identity and exile chosen by the scholars themselves, or we use the time to discuss with the scholars the challenges they face and how the consortium network might be able to help find solutions. The primary function of the seminar is to serve both as a weekly gathering place for intellectual and personal connection, but as Arian likes to say, it's also been a remarkably successful way to build what is now a strange sort of family with the scholars hosted by our member institutions. We also offer co-led online seminars, and these seminars are taught by our consortium scholars alongside an endangered colleague of their choice. They are free and open to the public, and this semester we're hosting 7 seminars on an array of topics, including language, identity, and gender, and comparative racisms. Many of these seminars are really well attended. Last semester, our seminar on feminist research methods had over 1,600 participants registered. The seminars give consortium scholars the opportunity to teach alongside one of their colleagues, to re-engage with the academic community, which they may be missing, to reconnect with students who they may have lost contact with, and to offer learning opportunities to students everywhere that otherwise might not be available. Though these are non-credit seminars, we do offer certificates of satisfactory completion that are signed by our dean. Additionally, we host an annual conference. This year, it's going to take place on May 5th from 12 to 2 Eastern. And if you visit our website, you can register for the conference there. It's designed and organized by consortium scholars themselves. And this year, the theme is The Life Stories of Exiled Scholars, Perils and Power of Academic Freedom Today. And we hope many of you will join us for the conference on May 5th. Lastly, I'll mention that we have an annual retreat, which is hosted by one of our consortium member institutions. Unfortunately, the last 2 years it was canceled because of COVID, but this year we are grateful to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut for helping us to plan the retreat, which will take place in July. This is a really great opportunity for us to meet with the scholars and our liaisons from each member institution and the scholars' families to spend time together over meals and over activities, but also to evaluate the consortium's programming and to look forward to the next year and make plans. We also provide other resources intended to reach beyond our consortium-hosted scholars, including our library access initiative. The initiative gives endangered scholars remote access to electronic materials available via consortium member institution libraries. And we hope this will be particularly useful for Ukrainian scholars and graduate students who are perhaps internally displaced within the country. To apply for the Library Access Initiative, again, you can visit our website. We basically ask for a short statement and a copy of your CV. And so we really hope to get the word out about the Library Access Initiative so that it can be useful for more students and scholars. So since 2018, we've tried to develop a myriad of ways to assist and support endangered and exiled scholars. This work continues to be done most effectively, as several of our previous panelists have mentioned, by working one-on-one with each scholar. Of course, the biggest and most difficult question to answer is what happens next when their fellowships run out. And it looks different for each person. And in addition to the programs and activities I've mentioned this far, we try to come up with tailored solutions. For example, teaching secondary school is an alternative pathway. So this was our work from 2018 to 2021, and then the crisis in Afghanistan occurred. When that happened, we felt we just had to do more to help the flood of scholars, students, and even artists who'd be forced to flee. Right away, we reached out to our network of higher education institutions to try to coordinate a response. We joined other organizations in the field to learn and to ensure that we weren't duplicating work. And we relied on our colleagues from Afghanistan to help us figure out where and how we could have the biggest impact learning as we went. We began to receive direct messages from scholars and students, and we attempted to match what they needed with our consortium member institutions who would be available to host them. For example, we heard from students who were living on the military base at Fort Dix, and we were able to connect a group of them with our liaison at Northeastern University. They're now attending Northeastern on full scholarships, including tuition, room, and board. And of course, a great many of our consortium member institutions are doing similar work, and we're very proud. I wish I had time to mention them all here today. At the New School specifically, we are working to create a university in exile for artists. Partnering with our colleagues at the Artistic Freedom Initiative, we plan to bring 10 endangered Afghan artists to the programs and divisions in the arts at the New School on one-year residential fellowships. And I know I'm probably running short on time, so I will pivot now to how our work changed slightly with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. When the war began in Ukraine, we anticipated again ramping up our efforts to support scholars and students. Local partners like the Ukrainian Global University based in Kyiv and the Kosminski University in Warsaw were absolutely essential in helping us figure out how to best allocate our resources. Because the situation in Ukraine looks quite different, as has been mentioned, men under 60 can't leave the country, and there are just masses of internally displaced people. We needed to develop new models of support rather than, for example, what we've done in the past, residential fellowships. We've initiated a program to offer virtual fellowships for those who can't or don't want to leave. We're also thinking about which of our core programs might have the biggest impact. And right now we're raising funds specifically to provide stipends for Ukrainian academics to teach co-led online seminars next semester, which they can do remotely and which will provide them with a little bit of extra income. So in close, I just provide a brief reflection on things that have worked well for us over the last 9 months. Because the consortium is small, we're quite nimble and we're able to react quickly to many different scenarios. And as everybody before has mentioned, our network of member institutions and colleagues in the field have been absolutely essential. And finally, it's been confirmed for us, as we've known from the past, that it's just absolutely essential for us to address each case on an individual basis and to work one-on-one with the scholars, students, and artists that we're trying to help. So with that, I'll stop. And thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Nicole. We have about 7 minutes or so for questions. And let me begin by, I know many people on this in the Zoom are colleagues at other institutions, at universities. So I thought we'd start off with a question that I think many of us have been wondering, which is, for the three of you, what do you wish you would have had in place last August before Kabul fell to really make this process go smoother, or to be able to scale up more quickly? None of us had expected what happened last August. So what do you wish you maybe had in place at that time?
I'll just throw something out there. I think in the very beginning, we were learning a lot about how a resettlement agency works. So I think, and we've had some great partnerships, but I think having those connections in a meaningful way, and wouldn't it be nice to just have those friendly connections, and we didn't need them, but I think for us, maintaining that tie. So I think, that would have been helpful to understand how we could respond and be proactive without interrupting a newly arrived student or young person's progress toward their benefits.
I mean, for myself personally, I really didn't know what I didn't know when this started in August. I just didn't know. Since then, I think what I wish I would have understood was how the so I was USAID funded. So the regulations around that made it easy for me to spend my money in Afghanistan made it difficult for me to spend the money in Albania to support the same people for the same good reasons. I wish I would have understood that better. So we could have had earlier conversations with US government, not just about, great, we can use our funds to evacuate, but once they're evacuated, how do we use what resources available to really support them to get them set up for what's next? And that's a whole series of conversations that have taken months that we had no idea we would need.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jennifer. Let me ask maybe a bit more of a philosophical question here, but oftentimes universities, colleges were viewed as being, primarily institutions for educating students by providing research. But what role, responsibility do we have as higher educational institutions towards supporting students, scholars, and their families when there are these moments of crises, when they're refugees, when they're in exile?
Maybe I can start with that one. I would say that as institutions of higher education, we have a moral responsibility to support our colleagues and students when these crises develop. The founding of the new school was built on protecting academic freedom, and that's something that we hope to continue to do by offering opportunities for scholars and students to continue their research, to continue their work, and their livelihoods.
I would agree, and I think I think our students are doing this, bringing this to us in different ways and with different issues. But I think institutions really need to be mindful about the values we espouse and the actions we take, and trying to keep them in alignment as much as possible.
I mean, I'll just say that I'm going to echo somewhat, President Goodman said was, it should be in our DNA as institutions of higher education. I mean, I'm at a land grant. I'm a product of land grants, and I really believe in the land grant mission. But all of us in institutions of higher education, we really all should be working to make the world a better place. And if this is a place for us to do that, then We should be involved, and we need to be involved.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Kurt. Go ahead,
Oh, sorry.
Tina.
I was just gonna agree with everybody else and say, like, at least for us in Berlin specifically, I think Berlin, we have such a, Germany, but especially Berlin, we have such a strong cultural and institutional memory of upheaval, because Berlin was, the center of so much upheaval from, the 1930s until the 90s and beyond. So to not then be able to extend the resources that we have to be able to help people in similar situations, I think would be doing everybody a great disservice.
Thank you, Tina. We are about at time, so I thought I would just wrap up by kind of giving some thoughts that I heard said today, which I think is, first off, how much networks and consortia are important for this work. I think these future crises that we may encounter are bigger and larger than any one institution. And I think learning from one another, being able to convene in groups like we are now to kind of build the infrastructure is so important. But furthermore, making sure we've documented these lessons learned well, so that when the next crisis comes, we are aware of what are the issues that we need to know. With that, let me just think again, the great work of these three institutions, and of all those that I know that are on this call that have also done a large part in helping support Ukrainian refugees, Afghan, as well as Syrians, Yemenis, and many others. Anu, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Bernie. And I want to thank all the panelists. There is one question that has been asked in chat, and that is, what are we doing to expand learning opportunities in this space for domestic students? And is that a priority? Does anybody want to take that?
Yeah, let me hop in here real quick. Michigan State, there's a group of us who were sort of understanding that the conversation around migrants is becoming more of a topic of conversation. We're really linking this to conversations around climate change, because climate change will occur, but a lot of the impact people will feel is via either migrating from a place or accepting migration. And so we're trying to blend this sort of conversation around when we talk about climate impacts. The reality of it is, a lot of people is going to be internally displaced people moving from one region to another. That impacts both the people who left and the people who are receiving. And we're starting to have conversations about that in Michigan State.
That's great. Thank you, Kurt. Sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I was going to add, I think one of the sort of value adds of hosting endangered scholars on our campuses is that they interact with the community, with the academic community, and with the larger community in the area. We try to promote as widely as possible consortium-sponsored events like our conference. We also have a scholar lecture series where hosted scholars speak at other consortium member institutions to both present their research and just engage with their colleagues in the field, but also to reach the students on campus and colleagues and raise awareness about, why they are there in the first place.
Absolutely, I think, and that's great. And Dean Murray from BART has also added in chat that the Consortium on Forced Migration and Displacement in Education is developing a shared curricula for undergraduates. So please do reach out to her to learn more. I'm sure that there are others there are service learning opportunities, internships, research, all kinds of things that can be done and are being done. So point of this conference, of course, is that we continue to meet and look at some of these issues, right? Lots of lessons learned. You're hearing it from our peer institutions today, from NGOs, from the UN, all of these things, even for UNHCR, for example, and Rosie can attest to this. Tertiary education is the new space. As you heard from Rosanna Kim, from the State Department, we are kind of untraditional actors, right, in the resettlement space. So many of us have pivoted and we've done some remarkable work, but we're learning. And I think this is an opportunity to kind of lock in those lessons learned and to kind of build on them, because the crises are only going to be coming fast and furious, right? So as we've heard. So with that, I want to thank again all the panelists that just spoke.